It's going to take some time to find a flat. You move in, there's no floors, there's no kitchen. I actually got sick because I was just so tired from finding a flat. Some people, they apply to hundreds of apartments and they don't get it.
Finding a flat in cities like Berlin, Munich or Hamburg is not easy, especially if you do not speak any German. And then there are specialties like Schufa, Mietschuldenfreiheitsbescheinigung, such a German word, or not having any furniture in a new flat. To find out more on how to find a flat in Germany as a non-German speaker, we will talk with Katherine about her experience moving to Berlin. Hi Katherine, you moved from Orange County, California to Berlin this year. What are the main differences between finding a flat in the US and finding a flat in Berlin?
So in the US, I've had a variety of experiences finding flats. They have rarely been as official and as much of a process as in Germany. So in the US, typically, I'll go on Craigslist, which is, I think, not a very big website in Germany. So that was like another main learning for me. Moving to Berlin is just finding out what is the landscape of how do you do these normal things. Because in the US, you know, Craigslist is very popular. So I was able to find 2 flats from Craigslist when I was living in California. But here, the go-to website was ImmoScout for me.
What surprised you the most about German apartments?
What surprised me the most is probably that there is a wide variety of apartment types in Germany, specifically Berlin. So I've noticed that there's some really nice apartments on the market now where they're really new and you would be the first to move in. And on the flip side, which is probably the more stereotypical experience, is that you move in, there's no floors, there's no kitchen. But this I haven't seen as much in Berlin, probably because landlords, they know to accommodate, you know, people that are not so familiar with those kinds of things. But my current flat is a dangling light bulb, so that's still something that I have to learn.
Did you know what the Schufa is?
The Schufa, I actually figured out what the Schufa was pretty easily because there's a lot of resources on YouTube, especially for expats moving in. There's a ton of stuff, and I also go on Reddit, things like this, to figure out what a Schufa is. And it was pretty easy for me to figure out how to get the Schufa because of ImmoScout. It was just like a button that I had to click. So even if I didn't know that it was kind of like a credit score system, I feel like if I knew that I needed it in an application and that there was a button that said, you know, click here for a Schufa, then I don't necessarily need to dive too deeply on how that's calculated and whatnot. But I think my Schufa score is okay.
Many people and also memes on Instagram suggest that it is very hard to find a flat in Germany if you don't speak any German. What is your experience here?
My experience was pretty mixed. I definitely had a lot of fear going to the process because of these memes and because of what people generally say on Facebook expat groups and just kind of discussions online. So I went in to the process with pretty, not low hopes, but just like with a lot of drive because I knew I would have to work really hard to find a flat. So I was able to find my current flat in less than 3 weeks, which is pretty quick, especially knowing that some people, they apply to hundreds of apartments and they don't get it, or they only get maybe a handful of appointment viewings. So I felt really fortunate in this regard, but I would stay up quite late at night just applying to apartments. The first week that I started my apartment hunt, I would sleep at like 2 or 3 a.m. just to be the first to apply to certain listings and just to kind of try to catch listings that I may have missed on the app. And I had a friend say, when you're looking for apartments, anytime you want to scroll on an app, just scroll through ImmoScout because that's any free time you should have to look for a place. So after 3 weeks, I was able to find my flat and sign it, but right afterwards, I actually got sick because I was just so tired from finding a flat. So it's a mixed bag. I think it can be quite simple if you get lucky and if you really dedicate yourself to the process. But at the same time, it can be a really tough process for a majority of people.
And how was the communication with property owners and landlords in general? Did they get along with communicating in English?
Yeah, I actually communicated with them in German sometimes. I would use just like translation tools online, and I think that worked out pretty well because they would always respond to me in German, which means that they thought I could, speak German, but obviously I cannot. So after a while, I would tell them, hey, I actually can't speak German. Is it okay if we communicate in English? And most people have been really accommodating. So my current place, the property manager, she speaks English really well, so I just feel very comfortable communicating any kinds of issues or questions that I have with the place. But I can imagine that if the property manager only speaks German, it could be a bit more difficult. But in the instance of my current situation and my experiences, the English has been okay.
On our app, there is a feature where you can draw a search area around a place or a city. Did you use that, and was it helpful for you to find your way around?
Yes, that did help me because I would basically only look for certain, within a certain area, and I'm gesturing around a circle because, everyone wants to live in the inner ring. But before I kind of started my, my journey of finding a flat, I actually would travel to other neighborhoods, and I wouldn't just stick around like the small cluster of popular neighborhoods because I want to see how comfortable I would be with my commute or going to more popular neighborhoods. So I actually try to do my research on expanding my search area and just to calculate the commute time. So that was another fun feature on the app that I had, was you can type in your work address and see how far a certain listing's location is from work. So that was a good barometer for me. So in that instance, I would try to change or make the draw circle a little larger, but I got lucky and I was able to find a flat in Friedrichshain.
How did you figure out what was considered cheap and what was considered expensive in a city like Berlin?
Yes, that was actually a very not cut and dry process because no one can tell you what is cheap or what is expensive, especially with the range of people who've moved in and have been staying in the same place for maybe 5-6 years. So what they find expensive is going to be drastically different from what someone new moving into the city, last year or this year would find expensive. So it's really just trial and error, and you have to just go through the listings and see what a certain price looks like in terms of the square meter and the appliances and how new a building is and stuff like that. So there's really no answer as to what expensive or cheap is, at least for me, but I think you should at least always go in with a budget and be comfortable if that budget that you have in mind changes based on what you see available.
Which advice would you give people moving to Berlin from abroad?
I would tell them that it's going to take some time to find a flat and that you may probably have to sublet a bit or find some more temporary months-long rentals before you can actually commit to a lease, like a yearly lease or however long. But the process is worthwhile, and during this time where you sublet or something, I would also advise them to just explore Berlin and don't get stuck around the popular neighborhoods where it's filled with clubs and bars and stuff like that, but also look into the different neighborhoods, see what neighborhoods you feel comfortable with and you can click in, because I think all the neighborhoods have something valid to offer, and that every neighborhood has something redeeming or fun about them. So if you have an apartment in Berlin, then I would consider that to be lucky already.
And last not least, how did ImmoScout24 help you with your search?
ImmoScout24 was essential to my search, actually, because I had Meter Plus, and I think that was really helpful for me to just figure out, is a flat even worth applying to or not? And if something has more than 100, I figured, on to the next. And if I could see that the listing was new enough where there were no numbers, and by numbers I mean the listing didn't show how many people applied or how many people viewed it, because I think that means the listing was less than 4 years old, then I would go ahead and apply. And one other trick that I have is, you know, by the time you finish looking at the listing and maybe you're trying to move in with a friend or a partner and you're trying to get their advice on, oh, what do you think about it? I would say just go ahead and apply and see if you can get a viewing, and at that point you can figure out whether or not something fits you, but you have to go with an open mind and don't get stuck on such hard criteria. Be more open-minded to the places that you can live and what your future apartment could look like.